G'day, folks. It is AoS Coach here. I hope you're all doing well. And I have got a special little round table that we're going to be doing today. I am joined by many of the representation of Team Australia. So I've got Michael Clarke, I've got Peter Orkman, and I've also got the captain, but also the mayor of Dubbo, Mathew Tyrrell. And we're going to talk about AoS Worlds. AoS Worlds is a tournament that has been kicked off. It's happened for a few years in a row. It has a history of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And this is the first time the Australia team has actually represented in the Age of Sigmar tournament. So I thought we'd all catch up, have a bit of a round table and discuss what was it like? Because I know as somebody who hasn't gone to the Worlds, I have a lot of questions. Who gets picked? How much preparation and practice gets involved? Is it just 6 games of Age of Sigmar, or does stuff happen, and I guess that's kind of what today will be all about. Just really, what is it? And if someone is thinking about applying maybe for next year, because I reckon so much between my Discord and Twitter, there was so much FOMO. There were so many people watching the live streams, chatting, just going, man, I wish I was there. That looks like so much fun. But gents, how was it? How was the AoS Worlds? It was in Prague, by the way, and it happened in May, just to kind of level set for everybody. So just overall, Clarky, how was it?
It was amazing. It was everything we could wish, other than our final result, which we'll end up getting through to. We got very close to the sun, but fell away. But other than that, ticked every box. It was so amazing just walking into the hall as we landed straight off the plane into the hall and then playing the Ashes, and there was just a roar of 200 or 300 people with the singles event wrapping up and everyone in their shirts, and it was amazing. Matt?
And by the way, I've got plenty of photos that I'm going to bring up as we discuss, so I can kind of help kind of paint the picture of what Worlds is all about. But by the way, I'll probably moderate a little bit just so everyone doesn't talk over each other, and then you go, I go, you go, I go. But Clarky, great experience first off. Mayor, I might go over to you, given that you were the captain, and then I'll rope Orkman in, because Orkman actually is an Australian. He represented the Australia team, and he was actually brought into the culture of Vegemite and Tim Tam. So I'd love to hear as well, like, what was his experience like? What is the crazy Aussies? Mayor.
Yeah, so I had the same experience as Clarky. Rocking up, I rocked up a day early, and then on the Wednesday afternoon, walked in to watch some of the singles action. And upon walking in there, I met a bunch of people that I've met over Discord, in your Discord, Coach, just playing online tournaments on TTS and all these world tournaments. And I got people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, it's Matt," and then introducing themselves with their real name. And I got no idea who you are. What's your name on Discord? Because it was the only way I know half the people on there. But no, it was a really big build up. Clarky and myself were 2 of the original ETC team that was named over 2 years ago now. So we've had a long slog of waiting to finally get there with COVID and everything else. So it's been a very long build up. As the missus probably could tell you, she's a bit sick of me being on my phone all the time, chatting to the team and talking lists and all that sort of stuff. So it was good to finally come to a penultimate end and get there and just perform at our best. So yeah, no, it was definitely something that I've always wanted to do. I think it's one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. I don't know if I'll be able to go again, just for family reasons and all that sort of stuff. But I was glad to be able to share it with the other 7 guys that we got to share it with, and they're all great lads. So yeah, it was a good time.
No, that's really cool, because you're right. Like, I remember talking to Liam when Liam was in the original team at the first Age of Sigmar Australian team. And there was obviously a lot of build up, and you guys were practicing, and then COVID hit. That kind of delayed, and obviously Australia kind of closed off their borders. So as much as I know you would have liked to have attended, you just weren't allowed to attend. And as you said, there's a lot of cost involved. What was it, 20 hours approximately? How long would it take you to get from Australia to Prague?
Yeah, so my day was really long. I had it's an hour flight from Albury to Sydney, and then I had I think it was an 10-hour stopover in Sydney, and then it was a 14-hour flight to Abu Dhabi, and then a 3-hour stopover, and then another 7-hour flight. I flew to London because I wanted to spend some time over there. So by the time I got to London, it was about 1:30 in the arvo, so I had to stay up to try and beat the jet lag. So by the time I got to bed that night, I hadn't slept on the plane. It was about 40 hours of being awake. So, and most of that time you're just sitting, you're sitting upright in a small, tight, uncomfortable chair, and it's definitely not fun. Like I'm not looking forward to doing any international travel anytime soon after that flight. So, yeah, it's a long time.
Clarke, similar experience, a little bit different for you?
Yeah, I flew, luckily I got a direct flight from Melbourne to Dubai, and then only a 2-hour layover straight into Prague. So I skipped a couple of steps. But my extra challenge was added in that I walked off the plane. Dave landed at the same time, and we grabbed a car in together. We literally got to the hotel, checked in, and Matt's like, Ashes is starting right now. And so we're straight into the unpack our shit as quick as possible and straight to roll dice straight away, like blurry-eyed after 24-hour flight. It was, it was a bit mad that first night.
We'll get into that soon, but I want to go to the man who didn't have much of a trip, because I've done that trip. I've gone to Malta, and it's like, you go to Dubai. I was lucky enough to be a frequent flyer, and like a very high frequent flyer with Qantas. So I get to go into the business lounge, have a shower, have something to eat, just feel like a human. But Peter Orkman, you didn't have a far trip. So you're not based in Australia. You are from?
I'm from Hungary. So it was indeed pretty nice. And, it was quite funny because, as Matt said, it was really, first of all, it was an amazing event. Just to reflect back to the original question, just very briefly. And it was one of the rare occasions when you go to somewhere, concert, whatever, and you have very high expectations, and it still exceeded these very high expectations. So that's probably how I would describe my overall experience about the event. But just going back to this topic, some people were coming to me and saying, "Oh man, that's really cool that you traveled from the other side of the world." And I was driving 4 hours and on a highway, and it was very nice. So I'm from Hungary. So maybe just very briefly how I get into the team. Maybe that can be a good occasion. So first of all, it's interesting that Prague Open is actually an annual event. So that was already on my radar, because from my place we have a very small community. We not realistic can field even a worse team. But this Prague Open is basically the only 2-day event where I can go just, let's say, on a relatively easy way and attend a good tournament. And when I learned that the AoS Worlds will happen to be in Prague, which kind of basically upgrade from a normal GT to a Worlds, I was really hyped. And I was definitely, okay, I go to the singles events, I will meet all my TTS buddies, because there is no tournaments in Hungary, so I mainly play in TTS. And then after this was almost like a logical step that since I just know so many people, even Matt played with these folks, they were just asking me, hey, why don't you join the team? Because I guess they were lacking a person. So for me, it was it wasn't a really huge commitment, in a sense that even if there's no words, I would have gone to Prague, maybe in a different time slot. And it was just really amazing that instead of the singles, which would have been fun, I'm sure, I could just experience this whole team event, which is just mind-blowing.
No, that's awesome. Couple of quick ones just from the chat. First off, we will definitely, so Gator Ale's mentioning about chess clocks or sandtiners. That's something that I do want to call out, because chess clocks were introduced. So I'd love to hear your experience down the track. And Michael Thompson mentioning what's the chances of Australia holding the Worlds. And correct me if I'm wrong, there is actually the event's not always in Prague. The event can rotate. Matt, I might as well pass it to Matt.
Yeah, so essentially, any current captain country can bid to have Worlds. So essentially, we could be bidding right now for next year's Worlds event. The issue with that is a lot of these countries that are coming to the event don't have a lot of money, and look, a lot of them were complaining about the $40 charge for a chess clock, for example, let alone having to spend $2,000, $3,000 to fly to Australia. So I think the biggest issue at the moment is if we were to have the event, we'd probably only have half a dozen teams rock up, which essentially, look, you just can't do a Worlds event like that. As sad as it is to say, I think we just, as a people, we just got to realize, well, you know, everyone in Europe can drive to where they need to. It takes them barely any time. They don't need to spend thousands of dollars on flights. And yeah, it's unfortunately, I don't think Australia will be having Worlds anytime soon for that main reason, I think.
No, and when you look at who attended this year, so there was 22 teams that attended this year. There was a couple of teams that had also had to pull out for certain reasons. I know Canada had a team that had to pull out. I think Ukraine had a team. There was a few other teams that either were aspiring. Yeah, Russia was another one. There's a whole bunch of teams that either were aspiring to or had to have a late drop. But there were 22 teams across the board. Majority of them were coming from Europe. You had America, you had, you know, England and Ireland and Germany and Belgium and Netherlands and Malta. And you had all these countries that, you know, as you said, let's be clear, Europe is really easy to get to, especially like when you can catch a train from England to France in an hour.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy. So I think the reality is going to be that who knows? But more importantly, why on earth would you go to the Worlds tournament? Why would you, Clarky, why would you, Matt, spend all of this money going to a team's tournament? Matt, I might throw it to you first as the captain, and then I'll throw it to Clarky next, and then Orkman, your couple of hour drive.
So essentially myself, so let's turn back the clock back to ETC. The reason for it was I just won Masters at the time, and I guess the next logical step is to try and be the best in the world, I guess. And I applied for the Australian team to try and do that, to compete against the best in the world, just to test myself as a player. So back then it was, I was keen for that. I'd paid for my flights just before COVID hit, so I was given credit for my flights, thankfully, but which made this time around paying for flights a little bit cheaper, but it was still quite expensive, considering flights had pretty much doubled in price since before COVID. It was just a personal thing. I'd like playing at a Worlds event is like the penultimate experience, I guess. You know, you can play in your local GTs around here, but playing at Worlds was a completely different. Essentially, after playing at Masters, I feel like it was like you were playing a Masters game every single round. Essentially, like it was the best of the best in every event. So yeah, that was my reason for it.
Cool. And just for anyone who is joining from outside of Australia, the Masters is like a best of the best top 16 tournament in Australia that rounds up our competitive season. Clarky, same thing to you. Like, why did you drop all the thousands of dollars and travel halfway around the world to play a game of Warhammer when you could just do it on TTS?
The big one for me was this was an opportunity to represent my country. I'm not particularly physically orientated around ever going to represent a team sport at the Olympics. I'm never going to do anything like that, as many of us in this hobby. But this is my chosen sport. I view it in a lot of ways as a sport, and I know it's a hobby as well. And I like that it's progressively becoming more organised in leagues and functions and masters competition, GTs, and then ultimately the Worlds. It's sort of quasi-professionalising it as a sport and legitimising it as a legitimate competitive event. And this is my chosen hobby and sport, and I got to represent my country. And when I put the application in, and then got picked for the team, I was just like blown away. I was so excited when the Sam handed out the shirts and we got the team photos as representing the country. That was my big thing.
And I imagine this is very true of everyone who represented, whether they represented for whatever country, an opportunity to compete best of the best, an opportunity to, to meet people, it's just awesome. I think I definitely got FOMO, but Orkman, why did you not only play Worlds, but why would you represent with Australia when you could play for any other country? Or we just like the only team that had like a free opening and we're taking anyone? Like, what was your experience?
I believe, first of all, this was like kind of a coincidence that for me it was like a very easy trip and I get invited. But definitely what I learned from even just playing on TT is that the team tournaments are just a completely different level. And when you go to a world championship, that's already a huge prestige, and you know that all the big names, you just checking the results from the statistics or the apps or BCP or just looking the list, all these people will be there, and that was just it's just a huge appeal. And for me, yes, I'm not representing my country, but I still have the dream that one day maybe we'll have a team Hungary, and it will be a really good experience for me. And perhaps, probably not next year, but doing some stuff just to build up the community. Maybe in a few years we can have a team, and that will be really great. That I'm not just trying to figure stuff out on the spot, but I will have if I ever make it, we have a good idea what's happening. So that was just really like a win-win-win situation for me. And it's a huge honor, of course, that you guys decided that I can be a good addition to the team, of course. So thanks.
So Matt, I might actually pass it over to you. So how does somebody get picked for a team? Obviously, for your country, if you're listening to this, things may vary. But from an Australian point of view, if you're listening to this, how do I become an Australian player? Is there a process? Is it just a bunch of mates that like you all hang out and whatever? Is there an entry fee? Like, how does it all work, Matt? And then, how did Orkman get in?
Yeah, so essentially we've gone through 3 different processes to get to where we were. So ETC, as Michael said, was an open invite to everyone that you had to fill in a form and send it in, and it went to a selection committee. Then we were selected from that, and then we had our team, and then fast forward to the first ETC got cancelled, and then they decided to postpone it. So we sort of stuck with the team for a little bit, and then actually I think Pete was the first, not you, Pete. The other Pete we had was the first to pull out of the team. So we had to look for another player at that point too. And then Worlds then got announced. ETC got the boot. So essentially we had a bit of a shuffle a couple of times, and then it came to the point where we sort of decided as a team we'd open it all up again for a new selection process, because it kind of, after a year and a half, it kind of felt a bit unfair that we would just keep our spots without anyone else having a chance to apply. So we essentially disbanded the team, and everyone had to reapply, myself included, as the captain. And it went to selection committee again. We picked another team, which wasn't the team we finally ended up with. We ended up, I think Clint Mallet was in that team. We had Tristan from Bendigo was in the team. And then so what ended up happening was once we couldn't go to Worlds last year with COVID, we decided, we had a couple pull out again. Tristan pulled out, Clint pulled out. So what we decided to do was we actually asked some players if they wanted to join the team. So Sam Morgan was one, and Dave Kerr was the other one that had expressed interest in wanting to join the team. So we asked him and he said yes. And so we had a team of 6. And then Worlds decided they were going to change the players from 6 to 8. So then we were too short again. So we had then Charles Black pulled out. So we had to find 3 players. I think, yeah, in the end, we went with the 6 Australians we had. We had Stuart, who's living in Japan. And then we just were struggling to find the final 2 we wanted 2 fairly decent players. Like as we've said, it's a lot of money. We didn't just want to take someone brand new off the street, that's never played before. It's a big commitment by us financially and time wise. So we looked through Australia. We invited a few. We were even invited the couple of the New Zealand guys. So the Tubbs and
like Bates.
So a couple of their good players, we invited them, and they just couldn't commit. So we had to look elsewhere. We looked abroad, and Sam knew Fabs from Sheffield in England, so we invited him, and he was at the time applied for the English team. He didn't quite get the spot, so he jumped on board, and he was great. And then I think we were one short, or Clarke, I think we had our 8 at that point, and then it might have been Charles pulled out, and then we were one short again. So that's when we asked Orkman. We'd played against him a few times in team events and on TTS, and I hit up Orkman after a game. I'd played against him actually in one of our events. I said, "Oh, look, are you interested in joining the team and coming to help us out, because we're one short?" And to Peter's credit, he was sort of said, "Oh, look, I'd prefer not to. I'd rather you get someone from your own country." And I said, "Oh, well, we've already got another mercenary from England, so feel free to jump on." So he had to think about it for a couple of days, and he got back to us and he said, "Yeah, I'll help you guys out." So that's pretty much how that selection went. It wasn't just an easy selection, but I think this time round, next year is going to be a lot different. I think Sam Morgan's going to organise it a bit better, and we'll do a full reshuffle, a restart. As I mentioned earlier, I probably won't be there for family reasons and everything else. It's just too hard being away from kids for that long. And but I'll stay on essentially to help with the selection committee at the bare minimum. But it'll open up to the Australian meta as well, the community to apply, and we'll go from there.
It was ultimately quite a convoluted process, and Matt and myself are the only two that have sort of made it all the way through the 3 or 4 iterations, and Matt described very detail there about how we went through.
That was about 1 million times more detail. I was expecting we had a poll, people could apply, we looked at their results. And we invited. That was what I was expecting.
One thing I want to emphasize, and a few things that the team has discussed in all its iterations, was a bit around probity and fairness to the community, which is why we went through that formal spill about 1.5 years ago and reopened it up. And I think there'll be more stuff coming out, and Sam will organise it. I'll help him with it a bit as well, and Matt's going to stay on. But having a selection committee and a written document of procedures and process, so that it's everybody in the community knows that this was there was an open inviter twice through the process. Everyone had a chance everyone who was interested had a chance, and we went beyond people who had just previously applied, because we were scrambling around to fill the 8 slots due to all the COVID and the extended time people dropping. But yeah, pretty sure that it's going to be quite a transparent, open and fair process that anyone in Australia is interested can apply. And you'll obviously have to have proven track record at Australian tournaments that you're a good player to make the cut.
And that 100% as well is not just for Australia. Obviously, every country will be a little bit different, but the standardized process across the board is that at one particular time, there'll be an application process. It could be Google form. It could be some type of email this with why you want to play for the country. There's a few other considerations. One is obviously going to be cost. Matt, Clarke, we're looking at what, on average, about $4,000, maybe somewhere between 3 to 5 grand.
Minimum. Yeah, I think my flights alone were $3,000, and then you've got accommodation, food, everything else. Mine was a bit of extended stay, but I spent about $7-8 grand all up. So yeah, so
it's a big financial commitment, and it's not a cheap thing. But also, and one other consideration that you need to have if you're thinking about playing is a lot of the times, and you will tell me this in a second, is that there is a selection committee, not just for who's going to play, but often what type of the army you're going to run. You know, thinking about the meta. If I love my Gloomspite Gits, everyone knows on this channel, I love my Gits. If I came to you and said, Mayor, I want to run my Gits, I'm going to play for Australia, there's a really good chance you would have said no for this reason. It's not because you want to be a jerk. It's because you want to be thinking about the pairings. You want to think about how you, as a team, you can do really good in the results, not just do the best we can. And I know that came down to Cancron, Alexander Cron, massive boatman, the Carriage and Overlords, but he didn't run that.
No, so that came down to, ultimately that was actually came down to his decision. Probably 3 months out, we were taking KO, but we played a teams event online, and he was playing quite a few games with KO, and he just felt that they weren't good enough. Like, he felt they'd fallen off the top of the meta too far, and he had too many bad matchups going into a teams event. Essentially, once we got to the teams event and we saw all the other lists, his KO list probably wouldn't have been that bad, but that's why he sort of went with the doc list in the end. But
yeah,
really as
cool
you say,
well,
as you said earlier too about applying, and you know, if you said you were going to play Gits, I think if you had to apply, you probably would have got a part because we were so short on numbers. But I think going forward, it might be a bit different. I think there's been a lot more.
If you allow me just to
interest.
Add one more thing to that, just because I think it's very interesting that I believe the international, let's say, AoS community matured quite a lot. And nowadays, when I talk to the teams, it's typically just picking players. So it depends. Some teams will be maybe just the coach will assign an army to you. But if you select it, it's almost like you are expected to play any sort of army in the game. And of course, maybe, I don't know if you are the best whatever KO player, they don't want to put you on Gits, but basically it's just about players and army comings on a much later stage. That's what I learned, and not just for Australia, but all the teams I talk to.
Yeah, like if I was to apply for the next year, and let's say it happens in January, you know, because the meta shifts so quickly and so often, you know, you don't have to assign me Gits immediately, but I need to have a willingness to play the army that isn't my favorite. There might be a commitment that I need to go buy a new army. So I guess when you are applying for the tournament, it's more than just I'm going over to play War Dollies in a different country with a bunch of guys and girls. It's about I need to be a team player. I need to practice. I need to play Tabletop Simulator. I know I saw the Americans took a whole week off to go practice in a house, and they just matched up, right? Like they had full commitment.
Yeah.
Clarke.
If I could add one more thing there. So having commitment to trading weekends and participation group chat, etc. is all, we'll get to those things. But the another thing that you'll have to be as a team player, everyone had to sign up when they applied as a commitment that they're willing to take the bad matchup and accept it like a man that you're going to get smashed in a horrible matchup, because there's a really important component of teams is around how you trade the captain trades bad matchups to secure good matchups. And team players, you're not going there to go 6-0 yourself individually. You're going there to win as a team, and that involves willingness and acceptance to have those trade-offs.
Perfect example, by the way, Sam's just pointed out here, is that, you know, when the selection criteria happened, let's say it was 2019 or 2020, right? Or even 2021, I apply and I want to be a player, right? Beasts of Chaos were never a faction that you would have assigned to me, you know, unless I was just like a mad, passionate, always did 5-0, like I was a super beast player. But then, as Sam's mentioned, White Dwarf has changed right on the cusp, that unfortunately sometimes it takes you to have the flexibility, but also do you chase the meta or do you stick to what you know? And there's a lot of science behind it, but I thought I'd bring up an interesting piece that I noticed on Twitter. And, you know, you're all referring to the matchup process, and we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. Here's an example on the left of what Team England did, was they looked at, you know, the types of lists that they were going to run, then kind of, you know, it's very much what's called the traffic light system. You know, who am I going to be really good at? Who is my preferred matchups? Who am I kind of like, you know, battle plan dependent, and also like who should you avoid me at all costs. And there's a whole process around matching up. I don't know if you guys want to add to that, but I just thought about a little bit about like how the actual game happens.
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about the matchup since I did most of it. Yeah, so coming into the event, I once we knew all the lists that were available, I asked every one of my players to we filled in a spreadsheet of we just did a simple red, yellow, green. You looked at your opponent's list and you decided. We didn't worry about battle plans. It was just a pure your army versus that army, whether or not you think you could beat it. If you thought you could beat it and it was you could win with a 15 to 20 point win at the tournament, you'd give me a green. If you thought it was a sort of a 50-50 matchup, that was a 6 to a 14 points. Like you could be in that range. That was a yellow. And a red matchup is if you can score 0 to 5 points in that matchup. So I had to, that's sort of what I had to work with each round. And then from there, we did our battle plans and I had to kind of work out on the spot or a little bit before which one of my players would play better on certain battle plans as well. So, with how the matchups work, you sort of got to put down a player. They put down a player, you flip them both over, and then you've got to counter their player with 2 of your own. So you put another 2 out. They do the opposite, and then you pick your matchup for your player, and they pick their matchup for their player, essentially. So if you had a really good battle plan for example, Stuart was playing Nurgle. He really liked the Apex Predators. So coming onto Apex Predators, I'd put him out as the first, the defender, I think it is, or the attacker. Put him out. So we knew he was going to be playing on that mission, and they'd have to try and counter him. So it's not an easy process, and it all happens very quickly. You don't have much time. I think in our second round against France, Dave Kerr decided to sit down with me and try and give me a hand. And after, I think, the second lot of pairings, he turned to me and said, "How do you think this is going?" I said, "Oh, it's going all right." And then he goes, "I've got no idea what you're doing. I've got no idea how this works." And essentially just he didn't help me at all. So that was a great help. Thanks, Dave, for that round. But most rounds I had Sam there helping me, just essentially just getting the cards out. And I had the matchup sheets in front of me. I don't know if you can see these on camera at all. These were our sort of matchups. So this was our first round. It's a bit hard to see, but I had all that to look at in front of me all at the same time and trying to work out our matchups. And I think England was our worst, if you can see that. There's a lot of reds and a lot of yellows and not many greens at all. So I didn't have much to work with against England. And it kind of showed in the end that they just had really good lists that matched up well against us and got smashed, essentially. But the matchup process is very hard. I think it was against Germany going into our final round of matchups. They'd left Seraphon for Apex Predators when they had little squishy heroes like a Slan and something else, and a Skink. And I was looking at Sam and he was looking at me, and I said, they've left Seraphon for the final round. Like we've got this one, like, and we had Stu for the final round going into Apex Predators. And yeah, it just stuff like that. Like it's like a game of chess, and like 4D chess almost all happening all at once. It's not an easy process, that's for sure.
Because it's more than just, like, for anyone who's listening to this who's been to a tournament, right? You know, you got your pairings, I win or I lose, and then I'm paired up with someone who's similar. Like, it's one-on-one. But, you know, when you go to a team's format, there's a lot more science behind, as you've said. Matt's the captain is trying to match up favorable matchups for you in order for you to win, but also who can really deny and, you know, throw into the red. I know, was it Darren Watson had a couple of red matchups when he was an England player. Was it? I think it might have been Darren. I can't remember who it was. But, you know, like going against the grain and trying to maybe not just get completely blown out of the water. That in itself is a science. Clarke, it looks like you're nodding your head. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, probably not. We could talk pairings and matchups all day, but Matt's definitely the best to to chat that, having sat in the captain's seat there. And
maybe just a very, very short shout out actually to Matt, because most of the top teams had a separate coach. So basically dealing with the matchups and all this prep work, while obviously we were only 8 men. So Matt not only did this but played, and I think this is a quite big task. So I personally was just absolutely smashed after the games. I was barely able to restart myself, let's say, from the afternoon game, and Matt had to do all this, go to all this brave work, which is, I think, it's pretty huge.
Yeah, I agree with that. Matt did really well, and I think it was a big benefit Matt had going to Europe a week and a half before to acclimatise. Like, my brain was fried because I just flew in. I think a couple of the other guys had only flown in with 1 or 2 days spare, and it was there's just no way he could have done that. I helped Matt a few times in practice pre-event, just running through a lot of different things, and we all did in the team chat and individual chats. But yeah, on the day, just no way could have done it without at all. So well done for Matt there.
Speaking of which, how was it like flying with Warhammer? Like, did you have to consider certain models that couldn't travel? Like, sure, something like Archaon, for example, or a Nagash would be hard to travel with, or, running Sylvaneth with like 1 million Wildwoods. I know you probably wouldn't run Sylvaneth anyway, but like, I'm sure that come into consideration. And I stole a couple of pictures from Twitter, one being from like Little Marathi and, TSA going through. And I've gone through this experience where I got stopped at Dubai and they wanted to pull out all my models and I got detained for an hour. That was awkward. But like, do you have any problems with, transporting your figurines? Any tips if anyone wants to travel?
Well, I took Archaon, which is a little bit insane in there, but I think the bigged miracle of the entire event is I didn't get a single breakage of any splintered fang or Archaon, not even a little whip. I had an exalted chariot with a whip, and the whip survived the transport. So I think just pack it really tightly, really well, and if the model can't move, it can't break.
Yeah, those Magna racks seem to be going really well. Sorry, Tyrrell.
Yeah, you're right. I just took a Citadel case, like the biggest one, and I had the turtle, the Eidolon, in one section with it took up the whole section essentially on one side, and then all my other models were in the other side, and I just took it carry on for every flight I could, which was every flight except from the Albury to Sydney flight, which they made me put it underneath, but it survived that, thank God. But the only time I got stopped, and I got stopped both times, I had to open it, was Abu Dhabi was both times I had to open it, and they kind of wanted to look through it a little bit, and I'm like, so it's just got models and you're trying not to open it too much, and then I think they get a bit suspicious. And
that's how I got detained, because I had religious iconography having my exalted warrior priests, and it was the 4 cities of Sigmar. They saw it, they freaked out. That my passport taken off me. I almost missed Blood and Glory, which was crazy. But like, you guys had mentioned a little bit earlier. Sorry, Orkman, is there anything that you'd want to add to that? Or
no, I'm just laughing because I just dropped my carrier to the trunk and just drove. So
in his car.
But I think what was really cool is, Matt, obviously it was in Prague, right? But London is certainly a spot that you can stop off, have a bit of a holiday. And you and Dave Kerr, the master. Both of you are the masters. You had gone to Warhammer World, had it played at a little practice event, met some people. Yep. How did that help you kind of adapt to the international meta, or at least, England's meta, which is probably the strongest?
Yeah, look, to be fair, it was only a narrative event. We were just lucky that it was that weekend, so we got to manage to play in an event. And as you can see in the photo there, with Dave and I in Bugman's Bar, that was Fabs. That was our English mercenary. So he joined us there and he played the event too. And we spent the weekend together in Nottingham in an Airbnb. So that was really good that was the first time both of us had met Fabs. So it was good just to hang out and have a weekend together before the event and essentially get to know each other a bit better. As far as the event went, most of it, there was a bit of a narrative event, so there was some narrative lists, but there was some actual really strong Worlds lists there as well. So it was good to get another run with my army. I'd played it the weekend before it, the Albury Border Wars, or 2 weekends before I went overseas. So I had 2 good events under my belt with the army before heading over, before Worlds. But yeah, it was good just to. We wanted to play the event more so to say we've played an event at Warhammer World. That was the big thing. Like it's not somewhere I'm probably ever going to get to go to again anytime soon. So that was pretty awesome to be able to say I've done that now. And just to see Warhammer World in person was really good too. But yeah, essentially as you ask about the meta, I think it was a bit of a warm-up event, but I don't think they had their best. They definitely weren't their best players at the event. That's for sure.
At Warhammer World.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. But it was more just like going out, seeing Warhammer World, seeing the dioramas, picking up incredibly cheap Warhammer. Like what I did, I bought 4 Start Collecting Flesh Eater Courts as well as a whole bunch of other like random things because I could. It's so cheap.
Yeah,
so cheap. But like I was looking at the photos for Worlds, right? The tables look great. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about with the tables is actually there was set default terrain maps, things that we've seen in 40K in like the ITC, but it's not very common in Age of Sigmar. Clarke, I might throw this over to you first, then Orkman kind of, to add on.
I think it's a really interesting thing. The official game rules allow a big advantage to the defender to set up the terrain. Now, at tournaments, that never happens, ever, because it's too big it's too variable what terrain's available. It's preset terrain because of time limitations and whatever else. So nobody's used to using the actual official rules pretty much ever. And so this is something a bit different, having it preset. Look, I've already wrote my essay on some of the elements of the terrain in that they added impassable as a comp rule to the set.
Just pause for a second on that one. Just pause on that one. Just as a terrain map in general, right? Yeah. Did you enjoy the fact that the maps were laid out? And you can see here, folks, that there was 2 versions. There was it was light and sparse, or I can't remember how they defined it. But light and dense. Yeah, but I really like the definition of the terrain and having set maps so you can plan a bit better. But also, sometimes, especially when it comes to like tournaments, you've been playing around with terrain or you're setting up armies, it gets messed up and it can become an advantage to one player. But as a terrain map, would you like to see this kind of used more often? Did you enjoy the experience? Then we'll get to the other stuff.
Yeah, well, okay, on that, I think it does add an extra 10 minutes at the start of the game to try and figure out all of it is and adding to it, which was completely fine given we're only playing two games a day and there was time allowed for it. It would be a lot more challenging a 3-game in a day event. They were, as you can see on the screen, they're essentially symmetrical. So the only advantage would be if there's a mystical or an arcane or something like that. And then not completely against it in theory. It's just the time impulse to do it up, and the fact that it was symmetrical meant that it did reduce the amount of gaming that was possible from them. Guys?
I like the idea to have this sort of preset maps, but I think this is maybe an area to improvement for next year's. And I think the organizer is very open to all sorts of suggestions. I personally, I find a bit gamey when one player or can a little bit set up the terrain, and felt maybe slightly more complicated than it should be with the light and dense, and sometimes it led to some sort of confusion whether a table is light or how it's set up, because technically one table should have been light, the other dense, but sometimes you had to hunt for pieces to fill out the map. So I think this is a great idea, but perhaps there can be ways to do a slightly better and more way that not leading to kind of gamey situations when you maybe not as you said, with the Impossible and some other stuff, especially with the Garrison, there are some really weird interactions you can do, which I personally don't like, but it's just me.
Yeah, personally, I didn't like it. I think it was a waste of time. Sometimes it took you 15 minutes to work it out because we didn't have a map given to us. It was just you had to find it on the website, and you were looking at it on your phone. And half the time, you'd be setting up the terrain for dense, and then you're accidentally looking at light. So then you're setting it up for that, and then half the time you and your opponent are setting it up anyway. It's not like just one person was doing it. I don't know. I think it added a lot of bloat to it that didn't need to happen. Essentially, it was a lot of time wasted. When I think the terrain could just be set up on the table, and you just move it to get it away from objectives and stuff before each game, probably would have been just as easy and quick, to be honest.
Yeah, I really like the standardization personally, just because you are at a tournament, especially like a best of the best tournament, across the globe, having some standardization certainly does have its benefits. I do like the definition. I think Age of Sigmar terrain has a lot to learn from 9th edition 40k, but do we want to go to that extreme? Maybe not. But I think definitely our terrain rules are probably a little bit too loose at the moment. So I love the fact they tried. And I know, like Clarke, they added a few extra things at the end. I won't get you into Rantcast, but go check out Sigmar Central if they want to see Clarke's more thoughts around the late addition to, was it Impassable and Garrison, or was it just Impassable?
Well, Garrison's an official part of rules, so it's fine. It was Impassable that was added as a little bit of a surprise at the end.
Yeah, especially when you're running something like Archaon with a massive base and what you can do with that on the table. I'm sure if you knew that, maybe you wouldn't take the big bad, or maybe at least it would change the way you're practicing.
Yeah, sure.
But I think there is also something on this topic, that it's basically a Worlds event, and terrain is, because there are no strict rules or no proper rules from GW, quite often interpreted very differently. For instance, I know that in the US they have something similar and maybe even more sophisticated system, and the tried-out system. And maybe that system, if you just implement here, would have been worked for them well. It was a bit different system, but for the rest of the world who are not familiar with this kind of system that you set up terrain, it just odd. So one way or another, at the Worlds, you have to accept that not everything will go according to how it is done in your local meta, but at least they are trying to set up a standard. And I think that's a great thing, even if I don't like some of the elements of it.
And I think, to round out terrain in the interest of time, the terrain itself was, I think, sponsored by the GameMat.eu to give them a shout. And the terrain was beautiful. It was all beautifully painted. It was fresh, new. There was more than enough.
So nice.
It was very nice to play out, despite the niggles around some of the rules because of the underlying issue with terrain rules in GW. But yeah, there was more than enough terrain of appropriate standard quality to what we expect, and all the game mats were all proper game mats, no wooden tables or anything like that. So it was a pleasurable experience to play on those tables, despite some of the rule niggles.
Yeah, we're talking about the rules here, not specific about the tables, but it looks like when I start going through the photos, like they're absolutely gorgeous looking. Like this is a beautiful tournament. Like, especially considering how many players there were. And I know, Mayor, you've got something up in front of you. And what happened, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a singles tournament that happened before the teams tournament, but Australia did something with the English team. And, especially considering there's a lot of people outside of, these cricket nations. What on earth is these animals, and what's going on here?
So that was the Ashes. That was something started by the ETC Australian team and English team quite a number of years ago. So we were sort of obliged to continue on the tradition. So while I was in London before the event, I went to Lords and I picked up what you can see, the two teddies and the Ashes urn. And so the two teddies were obviously given to each team captain, and then the urn was given to the winner of the event. But essentially it's just a warm-up game for the event, just to make sure we're all like getting everything right and getting into the swing of things. But
The tradition of it is actually, for all the global listeners of Coach, the Ashes is an event in cricket, the sports game of cricket that goes back something like 150 years. Whenever Australia play England as the first two nations in cricket, and obviously tight cultural boundaries between the two countries, and lots of friendships and family linkages between the two countries. It's like a 100-year-old tradition in cricket, and we're sort of trying to build that same tradition in Warhammer. And as Matt said, it builds off. I think a Warhammer fantasy battle used to have an Ashes, Australia versus England, in the precursor to events. So, yeah,
did it?
It's a bit of context.
And a bit of spoiler as well. You would not only play England at the Ashes, but you would also then play them in the final round. So did you find that getting a bit of practice, a bit of reps in against England helped you at all? Or do you reckon you gave away your trade secrets, and what was already a tough battle to begin with, they kind of knew how you guys played?
I think, look, we talked about this beforehand, actually, whether or not to try and go all in or not. But so before the event, I decided we'd play. When we played them, we'd practice the first round of Worlds just in case we did have to play them later in the event. So we weren't playing essentially the same matchups. So yeah, the matchups ended up being quite different from Ashes to the end. And I don't know if they learned. I think I played Darren in the Ashes with my Ideneth against his Seraphon, and he had me as a solid green. And after the game, he'd changed it to an orange, I think. So I think they made some changes from their matchups from our games, but look, it is what it is. They had a great team. I don't think our team were ever going to beat them just the way our matchups went, our lists went, and their players. They probably had 8 of their top 10 best players at the event, whereas we were, we were struggling a bit for our top 10. Like, we definitely didn't have 8 of our top 10 players, for example. So it makes a big difference as far as that goes. So look, we tried our best against them, but I don't think we were ever beating them on the day. So, but yeah.
No, and Sam had mentioned as well in the chat, the mission pairing against England can be tough, but at the same time as well, I saw a lot of praise being sung to Tom Morsley, was it? Who was doing a lot of the pairings for England. And I think that's kind of where, like, once you've had a bit of experience with a team format, you learn a lot and you're like, oh, I would have done that differently. So having a lot of intrinsic knowledge and people who have been there in the past can help you a lot. Not to say that this becomes an old boys club and the team kind of is static every year, but getting the experience and getting that knowledge, there's so much you don't know until you've gone to a team's tournament. And I know, like, when I've played at Runax, for example, being a part of the matchup pairings, being able, looking at that format, you realize how differently it is to a one-on-one traditional format. Clarke.
I think on that is England have a very strong teams tournament scene, and a lot of these guys play in teams, and some of them don't even play in their singles events over there.
Six Nations, Brotherhood, like there's so many team tournaments.
We currently have Runax, which Gabe runs highly successfully, and I'm so keen to get up to Runax this year, and I'm already begging him.
Well, we were going to play,
but but COVID stuffed it again. But that, I think it did show through the teams that had a separate coach, because had a complete headspace free, and that deeper experience with teams. I think Matt did an amazing job with it, but there was an experience gap for sure on how that all worked.
I did see
that. I think 3 of the teams that we did beat very comfortably, they all had 3 or 4 people helping him. They had a captain, coach, doing matchups.
So maybe it's just Tom being amazing.
Yeah, and he had Jack with him and Luke Morton. They had 3 really good, smart people there doing it. And yeah, when you've got lists like they had and players that they've got, it makes things a hell of a lot easier, put it that way.
Auckland, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. I think it's we talk a lot about the pairings, but and Tom and the England team is just did something on the next level. But I think we should also just mention it that it's basically, as Matt implying, you can do good matchups if you have a good team. So the team structure, I think this is something maybe for next year from Team Austria, maybe it's something to develop further, because I think they looked what sort of list they bring specifically for certain matchups to give. And in this day, we will play these 4 missions. We want to make sure that our guys have good missions, or even if you go into a red army matchup, but on a favorable mission, that is almost like a 50-50 quite often. So I think these 2 things come together, and maybe this is where they also were ahead of most of the other teams. That this sort of preparation, the team structure, which armies which list they're bringing, and how they introduce it in a smart way to the pairing. So I think these things all together. So it's not just that on the spot pairings, in my opinion.
I also think within our own team, we spent a long time and put a lot of energy and effort into the red, green, yellow matchup on a list versus list basis. We had it for every team, as Matt showed there. But then when you overlay the mission element, Matt kind of had to make that up on his own because we didn't feed him intel of the mission from the players. So that was a bit of a gap. When I was talking to Tom, they had mission matchup all mapped and prepped, where we mostly had matchup prepped, and Matt was sort of going with gut feeling on the fly a bit on the mission element. So that was a bit of a difference too, I think. Matt?
For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about here, by the way, with a team's format like this, it's not like round 3. Everyone in the team is playing Power Struggle. Not everyone's playing the same thing. There is a series of matchups, but also within the round, there could be 2, 3, 4 different battle plans being used at the same time too. So as Clarke is mentioning, it's about how do you pair up your strengths to their weaknesses, but also put them in a great position in the battle plan as well. Because as you're right, Clarke, 1v1, I might win, or I'm in a really good position, but in a really bad matchup, or as in like a battle plan or something that's really restrictive with terrain, then, as Owen Jackson's mentioning, pairing up with the missions is huge. And Owen was obviously playing at the tournament. It was in Wales, I think it was. But Owen was playing as well. That takes a lot of knowledge. So it's a part of the challenge, it's part of the excitement, but also certainly you've got to think about this game, as you mentioned, it's very 4D chess. It's not as simple as a one-on-one format. So kudos to everyone. And what I've got on the screen here as well is it was being live streamed by the TSN network, who's doing an outstanding job, the whole team, but also the French Wargaming. They had I reckon there's at least 3,000 plus people between the 2 Twitch channels watching the live stream, which is just extraordinary. Let alone, this shows you how the community is growing. What was it like playing on TSN?
Those guys. So go back.
Yeah. To be fair, I didn't even realize it was running. I just played my game, and apart from they kind of made us wait to do pairings, and then and sort of made us wait before we started our game. But apart from that, it was just me and my opponent playing. And then essentially I had a lot of interviews during the weekend of the guys coming up and ask, because I was the captain and coach, so they couldn't just interview our coach, it had to be me. So they'd come and interview me during the games and stuff. But essentially playing on stream, to me, it was, I just ignored it. It wasn't there, to be honest.
Did all 8 of you play on the stream, or was it just selected tables?
No, all 8. He had 8 tables set up.
Extraordinary. Anyone else want to add anything to that? There was a lot of cool media coverage, and I believe it's either available on TSN, I think, if you're a subscriber, or I'm sure they're going to clean it up and kind of re-upload it somewhere. Check out Rob and keep an eye out for the...
I loved it. I loved how Rob and his team that they pulled together, and the float. It was so professionally organized as a media kind of thing. And obviously we can't watch it because we were playing on the time, but the amount of private chats and personal chats that I had coming back home, that people had tuned in and were watching it and were getting excited and pumped around the event. It was the guys obviously did a massive job, and
family.
I think it really adds to the professionalism. Like, my mum was watching back home. She doesn't know anything at all about it, but she was proud of seeing me on the thing, shaking hands with my opponent, wearing the Australian t-shirt.
Hawkman?
Yeah, for me, once the game started, I'm usually very focused, so I it not bother me at all. So overall, I think it was great. And as Clarke said, and that's what I heard from other people who, especially when somebody has kids or just for can kind of play for the whole country, it's just so different. And I think it really just adds up. It just explains why everybody's so happy about this event or how hyped to do it again, because with all the coverage, with the professional coverage, it just all added it to have a great experience. And you felt that you get interviewed like an athlete, which is a bit funny, but it just really helped to bring the event to a next level, I think.
Yeah, and like between Twitter and Discord, and there's a whole bunch of things. Like it was great to see Agnes, and a whole bunch of like the council members. Just
a lot
everyone
of
was
people
just
from your server as well. It was great to meet those.
And we're all like talking about it in like a server chat, just absolutely giving it 24/7. A lot of national pride in a very fun element. But like talk to me about the 6 rounds. So I was going to say 5 rounds. It was a 6-round tournament. Who did you play? I know round 1 you played Malta, played England,
France.
you played USA. Who else did you play? France.
We had England, France, Malta. Who is it? America? What did I say? America, Sweden, Germany, and England. So we had it was a very roller coaster weekend for us. So our first game against Malta, we essentially captained. I think we had 117 out of 120. So following round, we had to play France, who finished second of the event. We got beaten by France pretty well, which dropped us back down the rankings. So then going into round 3, we had to play against America. Yeah, the US.
USA round 3. I was awake for the posting. I loved that game.
And we essentially, my game was over really quick, and then all our games went really well, and we capped them 100. I think we capped them, or we did. We got a pretty good score against them.
Something 90, 95-ish, I think.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that was against America. Yeah. So then we got bumped back up the ladder again, and then we come up against Sweden, who went on to finish third, but we only, I think it was 78-82. So it was a really, really close round, that one. I remember walking around with their captain coach for the last 20 minutes, looking at our games, thinking, are we going to win? Are we not? They were a bit the same. So that then sort of bumped us back down a bit. And then the final day, our first game, we come up against Germany. We were looking at the list thinking, we've got a lot of bad matchups. We thought it was going to be a tough game. And essentially, I had no idea how the team was going. I was in a hard game against Legion of the First Prince, and my game pretty much went to time. And all the guys were standing around me, and I'm like, how are we going? Like, do I need to keep pushing? And I kept playing it out, and I got the 20-0. And when I asked them, how did we go? And they've just turned around and said, I think we've capped them. And I said, what? We've capped Germany going into like round 5. And I just essentially didn't even think that it wasn't on our radar as far as points went either, because we were so far down at that point. So then, because we capped them, we got 120 points. We went straight back up the ladder, and we were third on the ladder going into the final round, which then paired us up against England. And England the last round, they just smashed us again. So it bumped us back down to 11th. So I think if we had dodged England for the final game and played any other of the top 10 sides, I think we would have finished much, much higher on the ladder. I think we essentially, our only 3 losses of the weekend were against the top 3 finishers, England, France, and Sweden. So I think from a team perspective, we can kind of hold our heads high that we did actually do pretty well. Like, we did finish in 11th in the end, but I think the fact that we only lost to the top 3 sides, and Sweden we only just lost to, like, it was a very close finish. I think we did pretty well in the end.
I think you should be very proud. So just for anyone who hasn't seen the outcome, England came first, France came second, Sweden third, Denmark fourth, Poland fifth, Italy sixth, Wales seventh, USA eighth, Netherlands 9, Belgium 10, and then Australia 11th. And if anyone wants to see this type of stuff, go onto Twitter, AoS Worlds. You can see the whole breakdown. You'll see a whole bunch of, I think one of the things I really enjoyed was that most of the countries, not all of them, but most of the countries had a Twitter account, and they all have a unique handle. And it was great to see all of the photos that were happening behind the scenes, what was happening on tour, what was happening in matchups, and just, it was so much fun to kind of be an observer here. Talk to me about your matchups in regards to the 6 nations that you played. Who were your favorites and why? Orkman, Clarke, then Matt. Orkman, who was your favorites and what were your favorite matchups and why?
It was really a weird one, and I can't really say a favorite matchup because for me the biggest thing was to meet all these people who I knew from TTS. I'm kind of a TTS guy because of practical reasons. I can't really go to real tournaments. So just meeting all these guys, and that was the biggest experience, and I enjoyed all the games. So I can't really.
Who was your most interesting team you played? How about I say most interesting then?
Oh well, I think the most interesting was definitely Sweden. I played Ronya with this very interesting Nighthaunt, and we had a very close game, which I guess not everyone can claim. So it was an amazing game, and for me, I knew Nighthaunt very well, so I was kind of aware what is all going on around. But it was just a game what you don't expect to have 10 words, and it was a great game. But it was all fun. It was also, we had an orc off with Jivan Noah from the US team, Iron Jaws against each other. So it's always a
It's that photo, right? That was the photo. That was the orc off. That was Orc Man versus
So that was a kind of a special. This game has a special place in my heart, but as a game, it was 2 Iron Jaws. So it's never the most complicated because we just hit so hard. Whoever gets priority often gets an advantage. But that was amazing. That's all I can say about it.
Clarke,
I enjoyed all my games.
Awesome. Yeah, and I have no doubt in my mind that you all had fantastic games, and I'm sure there were plenty of countries that you wish you got to play, and unfortunately you only get to play 6, and then obviously the singles that happens prior. Clarke, most interesting team you got to play and why?
Well, yeah, I'll go for 3, which is tough, but I love playing the England guys. I just got along with most of them really well and hung out with them for beers after the event, and it was just a pleasure playing all of them. I think I really like playing Jake from America with his Living Cities list. So he had a bit of a slightly more janky list, and we had a really good tight game that literally came down to a turn 5 re-rollable 9-inch charge, and that's how tight it was, which is always a great game. But my individual favourite opponent, I'll call out Sweden. My boy Adam Saff, he was playing Seraphon for Sweden, and that was a really tough game. And Seraphon are obviously a very powerful list, and I was going in as a red matchup into that, but he was such a really nice, positive energy guy that it was just a pleasure to play him. So I'll go Sweden as my favorite opponent.
But by the way, there's some absolutely incredible looking armies when I saw some of the photos. These were some of the nominations and the winners as well of Best Painted. So it was great to see that sports and painting was also a part of the tournament. Mayor, who was your most interesting team to face and why?
I think interesting team was probably Team America. They had some interesting players, a lot of fun. But I think favorite team, I think if I'm not picking them, would have been Team Sweden. They were all nice guys. There was no animosity between any of us, and it was all played above board, and they were just great guys. And my favorite opponent, I guess, would have been against Dennis from Team Sweden. I'd come up against his LRL, and 2 turns in a row, turn 1 and turn 2, I left techless on 1 wound both times, and it came back to bite me. It lost me the game in the end. It was a very tight game. We ended up, I think it was 12-8 the final score his way. But I think if I had killed Teclis turn 1, it was definitely, I think I definitely had the game quite easily. And then rolling for Prio turn 2, he rolled a 1 and I rolled my dice and hit his dice and made his a 5 and made mine a 3, and he got priority. So I think if I had won that priority, I would have easily have won that game too. But no, we had a good game, and it was I think Sweden are a great team. They were I think if England hadn't won the best sports, I reckon they would have been they probably would have been right up there too.
Yeah. Did you find one of the questions from the chat, in preparation for this, Brad Baker had asked, did you find any rules interpretations had varied between the Australian scene and overseas? Or did you all notice that we played the same Warhammer? Like, how do we differ?
So I had one notable one was against Sweden. Actually, it was his Teclis bubble, the ignore wounds on a 5-up. I attacked a unit of wardens that weren't wholly within the bubble, and he had a unit of, I think there was about 7 left, and I did something like 11 damage, and he took the first one off that was out of the bubble, and then proceeded to roll ward rolls for the other models. And I said, you can't do that. And he said, oh yeah, yes you can. And I just said, no, it's not played that way. So as I said, we were playing, there was no animosity, and we were right next to the TO table, and I just said to the TO, come over and just have a quick look. And TO essentially just said, no, straight away, no, you can't do that. And he said, oh, that's not how we play in Sweden. And he said, essentially in Sweden, they just play it. Once you're in the bubble, you can start taking your wards. Yeah.
Like mystical terrain, right? Like I can start taking wards out until I have no models within 1 inch of the terrain.
Yeah, but so he was doing it essentially the other way around with the bubble. So that was one rule thing I remember that came up. That was my opponent said they play it differently. There was obviously other rules contentions that came up, but none of it was that's how they play it and we play it different. That was probably the only one that I know that personally that seemed to be different to how they play it.
Orky, Clarke, man, anything else?
No worries. You can call me Orky, yeah. But maybe
Clarke, man.
we should just note here that that's true. There was still a few this sort of maybe different interpretation, but there was a very huge process to clarify some of the, let's say, to produce even specific FAQs by the TOs. And I'm pretty sure it was really crazy for the TOs. There was dozens of questions about all what normally, maybe if you go to look at the GT pack, maybe there is 4 or 5 things, but they clarify in the rules. There was dozens of things. So a lot of these kind of weird interactions, what you can interpret differently, the TOs try to figure out before the event, before list submission. So that also contributed to it that we were more or less playing the same game, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I had a rules contention in any of mine, and I'd reinforce what Orkman said there. I think at one point the FAQ had like 83 questions or something of really niche interactions across the game, and most of them probably never came up. But look, the game's rules are not 100% watertight. It's a very complex game with niche interactions, and I think addressing a very significant fraction of those before the event were really helped, and that's probably it's absolutely most comprehensive FAQ that any event's probably ever had before. So it's a good base to hopefully GW look at it and realize these are still the points of contention to smooth up in the rules.
And it's obviously critical as well, because one of the things I want to ask you in a second is going to be the language barrier. And, English is not the first language for every country. And, did you find any issues, or did you find any challenges, I guess, speaking at the tournament. But before I get to that, you can kind of see here, this is the Worlds. So you type in AoS Worlds and you bring up the website, but you'll see how detailed this is. And I guess if I'm competing at the best of the best tournament and I don't want to be having disputes, and if I'm running a tournament now, I'd come here and look at the FAQ and see how people are certainly ruling things. They've done an absolute incredible job, the council. So kudos to them, but this is deep. And if you want to see what teams were playing, you can see the charter, you can see the teams and who was playing in the teams. You can see there was a singles event as well as the doubles event. You can see the captains. Like this is such a great website. And I keep coming back to this because there's some really good information here. And hopefully you continue to see this to, build on and grow. And we see some of these slots like Greece and some of the teams that couldn't make it. Russia's another one, Peru, Belgium, like more. But were there any language barriers? Like, did you find that there was challenges communicating, or was it pretty straightforward?
So essentially, I think one of the rules of Worlds is you've got to be able to speak English as a common language. And then when there's any rule disputes and captains and coaches are called over, you have to speak English. You're going to speak the same language at that time. But there was a couple of teams we played against. They had a bit of none of my games had any trouble with speaking to my opponents. There was a couple of times, you might struggle to understand what they're saying, but essentially you're all speaking English and you're all understanding what's going on. I don't think anything was misinterpreted because of the language barrier, I guess you'd say, from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, but just your in-game interactions, there was no issues, because I know, I guess if I'm going overseas, I have some.
I'd say the custom I had all 6 games, there was a little bit of a moment before the event, before the game started, where every player that I played against was like, okay, dice, flat on the pitch on the dice. Yep, okay, good, we're going to play like that. Here's how we'll do this, here's how we'll do that. Just a few little... I don't know, the sportsman elements of the game about that can, in a normal event, if you're less experienced in a normal event, lead to points of tension. Like, is that dice cocked? Well, there was never any dispute about that because we all pre-agreed as custom, flat on the pitch. Cool, that's easy. No dispute. I think things like terrain that can matter as well, walking through with your opponents, that stuff. And I think I found... all my opponents across the whole world were playing with a very similar mindset on that. Like, use rulers, mark how far you can move, 9-inch. Okay, drop a ruler, that's where it goes. So there was no argy-bargy about rubber rulers or cocked dice or any of that stuff. It was all very similar mindset and play style on those elements.
Cool. So no matter where in the world you are, everyone's playing a very similar game of Age of Sigmar. And I wasn't trying to bait you and say, this team was cheating and like one thing that Lex has actually brazed. And last year I had a whole bunch of interviews with a bunch of overseas communities. And one of the things that, Lex has pointed out here is that some of the localized books, so some of them do play in English, but some of them have translation, France, Germany, as an example. They often have mistakes, translation mistakes. So, and I guess, not having a book in front of you, you can't refer, everything has to be the English book. Otherwise, I don't read German. I can't, look at your book. And how did you carry around all the books? Like, how do you have all the rules and how do you clarify that type of thing?
You had to take your own, you had to have your own books, obviously. But you're not carrying around opposition books, for example. Like, you don't have all the battle tomes in your pocket, but I guess it just comes down to you as a player with your knowledge on other opponents' lists and calling them out if you don't think it's quite right. Not calling them out, but asking them the question. But if your own stuff, for example, I was playing Ideneth and they have their own battle tactics at times, and I'd say I'm going to use this battle tactic, but before even saying it, I'd open the book and I'd show them the battle tactic and let them read it and explain to them how it worked, rather than just saying, I'm going to use this battle battle tactic out of my book and not show them. I always tried to make sure I was, tried to be as clear as possible with all that.
And Lex pointing out, I can't fact check this, but I'm going to assume that he is correct where it says bring an English book was one of the rules for Worlds, so to avoid any challenges and things like that. But one of the questions that are coming out from the chat, which is the real question that I want to know, is Orkman, what is your favorite Aussie slang? What have you picked up from the Aussie team that you're now going to incorporate into your daily life?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can say it actually, but what is still fascinating to
Not
me
the
is
C
that,
word. Just can't drop the C word.
but it is though, unfortunately. I would say that they still don't understand when are they right or appropriate to use mate or the C word. But I'm getting there.
Yeah, the group chat was pretty loose language at times.
Yeah. But in that sense, what I can tell you that what I really enjoyed and what was really a pleasure to join the OC team, that I think in some ways this sort of culture with the banter and stuff in Austria very similar to what we also have in Hungary, or at least where I grew up. So for me, it was very easy to kind of jump in and not get. For me, it wasn't weird that we may be using some of these maybe stronger words.
And I guess because of Tabletop Simulator, you've probably been exposed to our culture a little bit.
Oh, yeah, not to mention that one, yeah.
Yeah, you get people like Paz Kusei.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
definitely an Australian thing.
Okay, this is definitely, I picked it up, yeah.
We had a big discussion with Pete about how he loves pointy-eared factions and models, and how orcs have pointy ears too.
He almost stabbed you with a fork at the team dinner on Saturday night there, I think.
But this is something Matt only brought up when we were in Prague, and he knew that I just can't quit the team at that point.
He couldn't leave.
Yeah, just claiming that orcs or goblins have pointy ears, that's just... it's rude. Come on, man. It's just it's just rude.
Good segue, by the way. What happens outside the tournament? Like, do you hang out? Do teams come together and you go for the beers? You go touring? Like, are there outside things that you do, or do you just go purely for the tournament? You live in the hotel, you prepare for the next day, and then you go home. Like, what does it happen outside?
If you're Team Ireland, you rock up, you don't sleep for the whole time you're there, and you just constantly drunk and
pissing on historical monuments for the cops to come and arrest you.
So we got, after Ashes, we caught up with the English team and we went out for dinner and drinks, and then every night essentially we went out for dinner as a team and with other teams like Team US and drinks with just whoever was out. Like, we tried to make the most of it. Socially, coming from Australia, it's not like we can hang out with these sort of people every day of the week. So we tried to make the most of it while we were there and try and socialize as much as possible, because, you only talk to most of these people online and through Discord and TTS. So it was good to actually meet these people in person and actually get to know them. And, they were all... Look, I think everyone I met over the whole weekend were all great people. They were all really nice and friendly, and there was no one I could say that, sometimes you go to things and you go, I don't really like that person. They kind of rub me up the wrong way, or like you, Coach, example. But
by the way, I did hear Emma from Team America was pinging me on like Twitter going, I asked them why I wasn't in the team. Like, why haven't you got Coach? Like, Coach should be the coach in Australia. And I laughed at her.
Yeah. So, look, I come away from the weekend thinking that, look, I could be friends with any one of the people that were there playing. Like, they were all great people, all just there, all like-minded, I guess. We're all there to have fun and play games and go and drink and have dinner together. And, that's essentially gaming. We're there to game, but we're also there to socialize and have a good time. Obviously, gaming came first. We didn't go there just to party and not
if you're
do
the
our
Irish
best.
team.
If you're the Irish, that was a bit different. I think they came dead last in the end, but they got about 3 hours sleep for the whole time they were there. But anyway, we as a team, we went there to play Warhammer, but we also went to socialize and meet these people.
And that's true of all tournaments. Like, you know, me going to America, me going overseas, like I've gone to a bunch of international events. While I haven't gone to Worlds, some of my favorite things are not the actual games, not about the win loss and where I placed in the game, but rather all those outside interactions. It's the breakfasts, the lunches, and the dinner. It's going out for drinks. It's the things that you do before the tournament and things that you might do after the tournament when everyone kind of goes home and you go do things. You might go sightseeing. Someone from the locals might show you something. It's those moments that kind of made me travel. Clarke.
You don't even need to do that to go to Europe or America, LVO or Worlds or whatever. It's going to Gold Coast earlier this year and meeting all the Gold Coast guys. I think I only knew one or two from previous events. I know that some of the Queensland guys have come down to Bendigo events and have had absolute ripper times. So even just going interstate and mixing with a different crew from what you're normally doing, it's a different event because you're doing something a bit different, meeting a whole bunch of different people and feeling a bit of a different local culture too. Even if it's just Gold Coast.
It was a bit the same with myself and Dave Kerr, for example. Before this event, I'd never really spent any time with Dave. The only time I really ever met him was at Masters, and we didn't really get much time to hang out. But, we got to spend that weekend together at Warhammer World and staying in Nottingham, and then we stayed in the same room at Worlds, and it was good to get to know Dave. And I think I've made good friends with him now, and stuff like that. Like you make lifelong friends out of stuff like this, and even the English lads. Like we spent so much time with England, and like Jack and that. His wife's from Prague, so he was taking us around the city and showing us a lot of things and showing us what food to get and telling us, this is the local delicacy, and stuff like that. So I think an event like this, you can make lifelong friends with people from all over the world. Like it's not just the event, it's everything else. But yeah, as Clarke said, it's like an event at home. You make friends when you go away for a weekend, but this is just on the world scale, I guess.
By the way, lads, did we give Orkman the name Poiter? Was he Poiter or was he just Orkman?
I was calling him Pete. I was calling him Pete.
Sorry, that's an Australian reference for anyone you'd remember in the 90s. Poiter.
Was he off Fast Forward? Was it off Fast Forward?
Yeah, Fast Forward or Rewind or something. Like
full frontal.
Go onto YouTube. Yeah, full frontal. Like type in Poiter, like the most bogan Aussie with like a mullet. Like it's so good. Like tinny in the hand. Orkman, or yourself. I forget the question. Something about meeting people, like friends and all friends we made along the way.
Yeah. Maybe on that one, even though there was no question, I will speak up because why not? Maybe just to use this opportunity to say, just to reinforce what the other said. For me, it was really like a big fest or like a nerd convention. You just went there to kind of celebrate this kind of love for Warhammer, or pushing plastic toys with like-minded people, and it's just amazing. But what I think, but I can already see that we have a Discord for Worlds, and already seeing that there is a channel for events and a lot of events popping up. So what I believe, or at least hope, that at least for the European scene, let's say the continental Europe, the people just getting together and knowing each other will perhaps have to develop the local scene, because outside of these big countries, maybe England or France, the scene is very fragmented, not just by the distance, but also the language barrier. But now I can see there is a tournament in Germany, in Rome, in Amsterdam, and they're welcome, foreign people. So with English you can get away, and I think it's a great thing. So I really hope that this will also a bit gives a push to help to develop the scene as well. So besides of this kind of connection at human level with the friends, making friends, I can see that is also which can be a huge factor for the future.
Yeah, that'd be great, because I was talking to the Maltese team and the captain just after Worlds had kind of wrapped up, and he was sharing with me that Malta actually doesn't have any 2 days events. So Malta, like as a region, is like 27-kilometer radius. Like it's not a big country. So, for them, they got to travel overseas. They're going to have to go to other countries to get those 2 days. But if Europe kind of comes together, and if it encourages more players in America and Canada to go to, and I'm seeing it more and more, Canada and America getting closer together, other countries, even Australia, New Zealand, we go over to Notorious, they come over to Sydney GT, our communities are getting stronger. And the demand for Worlds, people are it's just such a good mixing pot, I think is really what I'm trying to say here. And hopefully it's inspiring people to go out and to travel. As Matt had said, we all have Warhammer in common. And I think that was probably the most enjoyable thing. Yes, winning is great, but also it's just the common language of Warhammer coming together.
Yeah, and I think in one sense, there is definitely a room to develop some sort of Warhammer tourism scene. It's almost like an event tourism, because if you go for let's say a long weekend for a concert, which is very common in Europe, or to a football match, to Real Madrid or Liverpool, it's basically the same commitment in time or financially to go to another country. And I think it was very rare before, but I can see that after this positive experience at Worlds, that will be much more common.
Yeah, I dig it. And
let's see how it works. But yeah,
like we've had heaps of people come over from overseas to play at our biggest tournament, CanCon. But likewise, like I'm going to the LVO at the start of next year, and I'm already being asked, fly into California. We'll drive from Cali into Vegas, and the minute you start hearing of those experiences, people are like, yeah, I'll look after you. I'll give you a hand. I'll give you and they really do take you under the wing. So again, whether you're thinking about Worlds or you're thinking about just international Warhammer in general, or even going outside your local community, I do find that people, when they find out that you're a stranger and you're kind of new to the scene, they will embrace you. So, that's a big win for us, because again, we all talk Warhammer. But one thing I do want to talk about before I start kind of wrapping this up is chess clocks. Now, the scene in general, we've kind of seen, people have talked chess clocks and the idea of chess clocks, and we see it in Magic the Gathering, we see it in 40K. Age of Sigmar traditionally has kind of said no, but with no experience. We just hate the idea of chess clocks for whatever reason. Now, Worlds introduced it into this tournament, and I know there was some staunch people who are against it that may have turned into advocates, at least from other countries I've heard. What was it like playing with chess clocks? Because we haven't practiced really with chess clocks, at least in our tournaments, right? Thoughts on chess clocks? Should we start thinking about it moving forward? Any learnings from using chess clocks? Like, what's the spiel here? And I'm going to avoid Clarke, because I know you've done another blog as well. You've done a blog, so I'll let you kind of wrap it up. But Captain, Mayor, give us the idea. What was your experience with chess clocks?
Yeah, so my first game using one was in the Ashes event. I didn't get time. I literally picked up my chess clock from the post office the day I was leaving, so I had no experience with it. In that first game, both Darren, my opponent, and myself had neither used it, so we were kind of really antsy about it. And we're making sure, we were really nervous. We were trying to punch through the game, and essentially we both finished with about 50 odd minutes on our clock when we finished our game. So we realized, okay, so we don't need to do that. So once the event started and we actually played some games, it was actually really easy. It was whenever it's your turn to roll a dice or make a decision, the clock's on your time. As soon as you've rolled your dice and it's your opponent's turn to say roll, save dice or make a decision, you just hit the clock. We had quite a lot of time in this event. We had an hour 40 each, I think it was. So it was a lot of time. You wouldn't get that in a normal event. Because that's a lot of, in a normal event, you may be getting an hour 90 15 minutes each. Yeah, hour 30 maybe at the most. But in saying that, the time included your setup as well. You're setting up your army, you were on the timer as well. So it wasn't just gameplay, it was set up as well.
Total time.
Yeah,
like redeploy. Like, for example, it's your turn, Matt.
Yep.
And I'm thinking about doing a redeploy. Like you're on the clock. And
so what happens
do I have to declare?
If you move your models and your opponent doesn't say anything, you just keep moving. Essentially, sometimes you would think that they were going to redeploy, so you'd move your model and then you'd ask them and then you'd push the clock. and while they're thinking about answering, it's their time. Then they say no, and you just click the clock again. But if they decide to do it, then yeah, it's on their time. And same with like when I was playing against Pink Horrors, when I was killing pinks and they were splitting, it was their time, on their time to replace the models, not my time. So yeah, essentially every time you have to do something, it's on your time. Making a decision for heroic action, it's on your time. Like I pick my heroic action, I click the timer, it's on your time. Yeah. So only one game of mine actually went to time, and that was one of my opponents playing Legion of the First Prince. He had a unit of 30 Pink Horrors, or 20, I can't remember. It was quite a lot, but he timed out, and I still had about 20 odd minutes left on my clock. So what happens when someone times out is they cannot do anything for the rest of the game. They cannot attack, they cannot move, do battle tactics, whatever, but they can roll save dice.
Saves,
so
yeah.
Once you run out of time, all you can do is roll save dice. So then it was only one more turn of the game left, and I got to play my turn and finish the game. I was going to win the game anyway, but that was the only game that went to time for me. And most of my games, we still had plenty of time left. Like I think a lot of people were worried about running out of time, and I think some people were worried about the clock as well. And there was quite a few games where people were forgetting to push the clock, and their opponent was then using up their time. But it's just something you get used to. I think if you want to try and bring it into a local scene, I don't think it doesn't need to be done at local tournaments, I don't think. But I think if you're going to look forward to maybe Masters and stuff like that, I think it could be definitely something that could be used. Like there's nothing worse than having a game at Masters be called at the bottom of turn 2 because one player used up all the time and the other player had no chance, like I think something like that's a bit unfair on some people, and even in normal tournaments that can be unfair. But I think in a normal tournament setting, you've got a lot of people that aren't there to be super competitive either. They're only there for fun. So making them play on a chess clock's a bit tough, I think.
I was having a good debate, and I'll go to Auckland in a second. I was having a good debate with Gareth Thomas in Discord, big advocate over on the West Coast. And one of the things we kind of both agreed upon was that, day one, you probably wouldn't use chess clocks. But at a regular GT, when you have people who are 3-0 currently and in contention to win, you may introduce chess clocks for the top tables, the people who are in contention. But then the question I have is, well, are they the people that you've got issues with timed anyway? And I would probably say no. I'd probably say they're not the people who they know their army, they've practiced a lot, they are sharp, they're finishing their games on time. It's always like that middle of the pack. So, I've got some interesting thoughts, and I don't think we've quite got a solution yet. Auckland, any thoughts or anything you want to add or challenge from using
I think
blocks?
Just to join what, or just reinforce what Matt said, I think what the biggest learning for me, that it just makes the game much more fair. And just to give you an example, I had a game when first 2 turns was super quick, so we had plenty of time. And so when I had some tough decisions in the late game, I was just very, very easy to spend my time because I knew I had time, so I can take a time, or maybe you can take a walk, whatever. It's your time, and I think in some way it makes the game less stressful. And because in a normal tournament, if you just take a walk, that would be really odd, right? Like you playing with the time, but it's your time. You just do whatever you want to do, and I think it was somewhat even liberating in some sense. And I had some practice before, so it was not a problem for me. But I also, what I would add, that it's really a good thing for competitive tournaments. But what I would suggest to use even a chess clock, or just there are some applications on your phone for beginner players. Because for instance, I'm also running some tournaments locally, just very small one-dayers, and I realized that some of the people get very slow. But if you when you play at your friends, just put the time to unlimited, 5 hours for a game, whatever. Just simply the fact that when you play and you realize how much time to spend on sometimes on small decisions, 5-10 minutes on a minor decision, it's really like, oh my God, why I'm doing this? And once you learn this, next time, even if you don't use chess clock, you will be much faster. So what I would say, that maybe use it only on the super competitive tournaments where it's important to be super fair with the time, but definitely try to use it just to recognize how much time you're spending on maybe sometimes silly things. So I think it's really good to try it.
Yeah, I think, to your point, I've had plenty of games, and I was always worried as a tournament organizer with third edition, right? There's so many more decisions, whether it's redeploy, I have to choose battle tactics. There's so many things, heroic actions. There's so many things that I need to do that will just create more decisions. And when you're under the clock, you're going to come to, and good players do this already, but they already have an idea of the battle tactics they want to use through the rounds. They know when the best times are and what the triggers might be to use other battle tactics, as opposed to sitting there going, right, I've got 10 options if I do this, and you sit there with analysis paralysis. So having that, and I've been there where someone sits literally for 5 minutes trying to work out what the battle tactic is. And then we get to turn 3 and I'm going really fast, and it shouldn't be on me to rush my decisions because it took you 10 years to play the game. And look, I'm usually okay with it and we can work something out, but being on the hook does make that decision-making process, but also the practice and preparation just even more important. Clarke, what would you say? What would be your synopsis of the chess clock discussion from your blog?
So that wasn't actually my blog. That was Dave's blog, I think, on that one. So
I didn't
do the full analysis there, but I actually like them. I was a bit hesitant initially, but I like them, and I want to go back a little bit of a step and some of the other stuff we already talked about. There was a lot of things done pre-event that smoothed out the points of friction. So if I think about where are the points of friction? There's points of friction on certain niche rule interactions that GW are not clear on. Causes tension with players, call the TO, sometimes things get heated, okay? We eliminated nearly all of that by having a comprehensive fact beforehand. There's points of contention on dice. Is that dice cocked or not, particularly when it's like a 6 on a priority roll or whatever. You eliminate points of contention by pre-agreeing flat on the pitch. And chess clock, a timeout event is pretty rare in the Australian scene, but it does happen 1 or 2 times every event, and sometimes it gets a bit heated and contentious because it could be somebody pushing to quite high in the tables based on the result of a timed out game. Taking chess clocks, it removes a point of friction and a point of tension from the event of. Again, we don't have it much in Australia, but we've all been at an event where there's been a little bit of an ugly moment between 2 players.
I had it at City GT. I had it at City GT. They weren't at the punch up fight level, but it was speeding up things and
it created tension versus taking chess clocks. You've removed a point of friction that is going to cause a potential ugly moment. So I'm a fan. I'm sold. Look, I'm a fan.
Yeah, my closing comment here is give it a try. I think give it a try, see how you go. Would I do it at my local 1-day friendly local game store, learning a list? Probably not. But if I was preparing for a tournament, I was going to a major event and I want to get better and faster and sharper, maybe I do, or at least I measure, as Orkman said, I measure my own actions and I just look at my own clock to make sure that I'm not being too slow. And,
I'll also add here, not just from a player perspective, but from a TO perspective, those points of contention of, okay, the game's timed out at round 3, TO, can you make a judgment call of who would have actually won this? If the TO imposes chess clocks, you've taken a world of headache off your own plate as well.
Matt, Orkman, anything else you want to kind of say on the chess clock discussion?
That's it. I think, I love it.
I think it's I think it's a good way forward. I don't know what you're saying, Coach, about not having it in the first couple of rounds at an event. I don't know if that works either because if you're a top player and you come up against a really slow player and you lose the game because of it, that could really hurt the rest of your tournament as well if you're wanting to finish high. I think if you're going to have it at a tournament, it'd have to be every round, but it's one of those things. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon at Australian events, but who knows? Someone might want to have a go at it and make their event official with a chess clock. And I think once people have played with it, I think you'll actually realize it's not the end of the world. Like, I've seen a lot of comments online about this in recent weeks, in the last week, about how this is going to ruin the game, and it's the end of the world if we play with chess clocks. Like, we're ruining the fun, and Age of Sigmar is not meant to be played like this. But we're not playing narrative Age of Sigmar, we're playing competitive Age of Sigmar. We've already got time limits on our games, which the rules don't stipulate time limits. So essentially, I think it's something we should try, and I think I'm on board with everyone else at the event. Most people were skeptical on it, but after the event, I don't think anyone at the event reckoned it was a bad idea. Like, I think everyone actually liked the idea of it.
My comment comes from, if I think about the average tournament, right? I'm talking a major event. There's only a subset of people who actually want to attend and win the event. I'm thinking about the fat middle, and I think the fat middle are not interested in the chess clock. But then at the same time, that's where I find the issues are mostly happening, right? People who are not practicing and preparing, they're taking armies like Gitz or Skaven or lots of models, and it's taking them too long to deploy. It's taking them too long to move. And that's where time is running out. It's often not the top table. So I think, to your point, and I think it's kind of where I was already at, give it a shot. Yeah. See how you go. I think it's crazy to kind of get rid of them and not use them without even trying.
Yep. And at the end of the day, we've already got time limits at events. Like, it's just another time limit.
And it might make players, especially people who take lots of models, practice more, be sharper at those decision making, because deploying and then getting tools like movement trays and things will help a lot.
And it's not even armies with a lot of models. It's like armies like LRL that don't have a lot of models. It's like their hero phases just take forever. They've got so many different spells and abilities. Zinch, yeah. So it's not just your spam armies like Gitz. It's a lot of armies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not. I do find horde armies, but you're right. Like, there are other armies that are quite complicated. But yeah, like, it's good that we are at least open to chess clocks. Couple of final questions to kind of wrap this up. I think we could talk forever. So first off, thank you so much. And also thank you to the TSN and French War Game and also the AoS Worlds in general, who put on an incredible event, to the broadcasters, people who are sharing photos. Like, I was going through Twitter today, just kind of getting photos, and like, I showed a whole bunch of photos. There's just so much cool stuff. And I'm sure there's cool stuff that I've missed. I just want to bring up the photos again. We did have our winners. We had England, we had France, and we had Sweden. What were some of the things that you learnt that maybe you wish you knew you would do differently next time? Was it, was there anything in particular? I know you mentioned the matchup and not quite factoring into battle plans. Did you have like off meta lists? Was there things that maybe you should arrive earlier? It's kind of like just a general open question, like lessons learned. Clarke, I'll go to you first, then we'll work our way up.
Yeah, probably my two big ones. I wish I had arrived 2 or 3 days earlier. I think I was still feeling jet lagged into day 3, and I did think it impaired my decision making a little bit. So definitely arrived a bit earlier. I probably ideally would have loved to have come with Matt and Dave and did a week-long tour through England and Nottingham first, but for a variety of reasons didn't do that. But that's one lesson. Second lesson would be I took a jank list. It was a bit of an off-meta, somewhat experimental list for reasons, and it didn't quite pay off ultimately. So I think when you look at lists like England's list, France's list, in particular, the gold and silver medalists, they were just pure, absolute top-tier filth. No room for jank, no room for anything. Maybe my man Darren had a little bit of jank in his Seraphon, but frankly, you could just take a random bunch of models out of that book and it's going to be S tier, so it doesn't really matter. Sweden did, however, sneak onto the podium with at least 2 off-meta janky type lists on the other hand. But yeah, for myself, I took a jank list that I didn't quite practice enough with and was a bit too off-meta and it didn't quite pay off.
While you talk about meta, how was the Aussie meta versus the international meta? Any things that you learnt kind of from that perspective?
Nah,
I don't think it was much different, to be honest.
The top lists were sort of known to be the top list globally, and at least in our Aussie chat, we were analysing the big events in the last, at least the last year. Whenever there's an event, okay, who won, what they're running, whatever else, and so no big surprise when we saw things like the England and French list. You look at it, and go, yep, that's no big surprises there.
I think probably the one thing that I noticed is, so I'll be chatting to Richie from the Team England next week. And, I don't think Australia really has that Fire Slayer player. Like, I know Joel McGrath plays him, but like, I think for some of the things that we have, there's not a lot of players who are really good playing the really good. So I don't think we get to see the best of the best in certain of the high meta factions. At least it's my experience, right? Like, do we have a top LRL player? Like an absolute,
so just to counter your Fire Slayers, we had Chuck on the team for a while in old AoS 2, and he went 6-0 at CanCon with Fire Slayers and had originally intended to run Fire Slayers back in 3 iterations ago. We do have Joel McGrath and Nathan Thompson both playing the current, even this weekend, they're both playing pretty similar lists to the England list with the Magma Dragon spam. So, yeah, LRL is a bit of a lack in Australia. No one's really playing the Fox Sentinels, that absolute horror show list of Fox and Sentinels. No, I think nobody has enough.
The stomach.
They just don't want to have to deal with 5 rounds of being shamed for taking.
It's a bit of tall pop. It's a bit of tall poppy syndrome, right? Like Australians don't want to run the 50 archers and the 2 foxes. Yeah. Like, it's a bit of an eye roll. But in England,
same with Seraphon. We don't really see the bulk Seraphon lists. Like some major events in England. I think one of the big events in the lead up, there was like 10 Seraphon lists, and they all come in the top 20 of the event, all playing against each other. We just don't see anything like that in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one thing that really separates England from the rest of the pack is that the amount of events that they have, almost like on a weekly basis, and big events, you get a lot of exposure to a lot of the top armies in the hands of a lot of top players very quickly, while we are so far few between, and we're growing. It's getting better, but I think we're growing.
I think a common observation nearly all of us made, and Matt may have made it earlier in the chat, is every game was a table 4, table 5 game. So as fairly top tier players in the team, a lot of us are, you go to an average Australian event, and unless you get an unlucky pairing versus Matt in the round 1, generally you're not going to run into Matt until round 4 or 5 after the sort of sortings have kind of worked themselves out. And so kind of only playing the really hyper competitive in round 4 and 5. And so the first day is often not quite as sharp as maybe the Worlds event is.
Yeah, don't say that too loudly, or we might start talking about ELO in tournaments. Orkman, what are some of the things that you've learned and picked up?
So I believe the meta, I think, is very international now. So all the information is out there. So I don't think that there was any. There was a few off meta lists, but most of the lists were kind of what we were expecting. And on my behalf, I think it's quite funny that my experience is maybe quite the opposite what Clarke had, because when I joined the team, and I was really honored, and I felt also the responsibility. I wanted to bring an army which I'm very familiar, and maybe, like I brought Iron Jaws, which was maybe a kind of army which is easy to figure out. It has some nice tricks and play, but let's say if I go to the singles, I will bring some big or some more funky, janky element which can maybe surprise people off. So I guess it was maybe easier for us to pair, but also the opponents was also very easy because everyone knows how Iron Jaws works and operates. So maybe my experience was that maybe I should have. But this is also about the team structure, which is super important, how it fits to the team. But maybe I should have been leaning more to the jank. So that's why it's a bit funny that Clarke said that maybe bring something more conventional. So I guess the best would be to bring some sort of unexpected list, let's say a bit janky, but practice a lot in a very, very competitive games, and that can really pay dividends. But ultimately, it was fun, and I think you can't even. For instance, I get some questions. What would I change the list, which is typical after a singles event, but I don't think I will change my list. Maybe I will bring another army, but that's again, we need to start from the scratch and discuss what army fits to the team. But I think the list did what they did. I'm not 100% satisfied with the results, but that's another story.
It's always the case, like I'm having this discussion. I'm going to a tournament next week, right? And I'm playing Daughters of Cain. Do I bring a second High Gladiatrix? Do I take the Blood Viper? And I think they're both great options. It's going to depend on matchup dependent. If I go to this tournament with my Blood Viper and I don't play Nurgle or Deepkin, then it's a complete waste. But if I do, then I'm a hero. So it's obviously hard to reflect on, and it's the same as any GT. But I'm hearing you, like, you can't just run all of the net lists, because top players have practiced against those really strong lists and have figured it out. So you do need a little bit of jank, but obviously not too much that if it goes pear shape, then yeah.
It is what it is. Sometimes you just have to take the bullet.
Matt, what did you learn?
So I think I learned that we probably would have been a lot better off to have a coach, have someone that can walk the tables, and if any of our players need help, they can just call upon and have a timeout and have a chat about where the game's at. I think in what round was it? Round 3 against America, I had 3 timeouts during my own game. I'd finished my game early.
What's a timeout? I'm sitting here.
Sorry. So with the chess clocks and everything, and with the team event, you can call a timeout. It's on your time, and you can call over a coach or your captain, which I was both. So it called me over, and your player essentially asks you, how's the rest of the games looking? Should I continue to push hard for a possible strong win, or should I take it easy and try and just get a win? Like, there's a lot of questions, and then you were asked, like, a few times I was asked during a game, like they've just won priority, for example, and asking what they should do. Should I take priority? If I do, what should I do? And I rock up to the table, I have a look at the table, ask what's the points, whose turn is it, what battle tactics have you got left? And I'll, being someone that knows the game pretty well, I can look at the game table, just a fresh set of eyes, for example, and say, look, maybe you need to go that battle tactic, bring it down there, take the turn, go for that, kill that unit. Or if you're giving it away, for example, in one of Fabs's games, I told him to burn a certain objective. And after the game, he came up to me and said, I wasn't going to burn that one, but by burning that one, it won me the game quite easily. He was going to burn another one, and he probably would have lost the game because it was marking territory. We got to hold all 3. But so essentially, I think, so against America, I had 3 timeouts where I had to go ask and help them out during the game. A couple other games, I just had to take my own time out of my own game to go and help them. And essentially, I was just playing because I took Ideneth with not a lot of bodies. My games were quick anyway. Like, I was never running out of time in my games, put it that way. So
when I talk to people at the event, I was being told very quickly your games were finishing, either you're winning quickly or you were losing quickly. But I think it's interesting, right? Because, like, to rewind for a second, there is that coach role, and the coach isn't allowed really to interfere with games. So it's not like you're a bystander for the whole tournament and like whispering in the ear. There's these certain timeout moments. And I know some other coaches had other things, right? I think it was at the French or the Welsh, or there was someone with like a trolley cart giving out food and water and beers and just generally looking after the well-being of the players, as well as those timeout moments where you can kind of just not step in, but like give a player a hand in a limited time.
Yeah, and
so
maybe
they've got to ask you. Yeah, Pete. Yeah, go.
Yeah, sorry, just a very quick comment. What they also did, and especially the French who were super organized, they made notes, and I think it's not something we should underestimate, that you can't interact like as a coach, but you just wander around, make some notes, and after this you can analyze the game, and obviously they're also doing that before in the practice, and I think it can be really huge because quite often you just don't recognize some certain behavior or practices you have, and it just very easily you can fix it, and you are on a better level, and that is can be really huge.
Absolutely. I want to add two things to that. At a personal level, Dave finished one of his games a bit earlier, and he kind of watched my game on something, and then over a beer at night there, he pointed out, well, Clarke, you do this and you do this, and maybe don't do those. Absolutely invaluable insight, because you can't see yourself. The coach can see you, just like that. And that was the improvement. The other one I want to point out around the French, the almost professionalism, sports team professionalism of the French coach. I had breakfast with him on the Saturday morning after they'd beat us on the Friday, and we were the only two in the breakfast bar, and had a long chat with him. And the way he was saying how they go about things, including having their assistants take notes and do a debrief at the end of the round and at the end of the night around, okay, turn 3, Jimmy, you should have done this or you should have done that or whatever. It was very much almost like an AFL or a soccer sports team mentality of continuous coaching and continuous improvement. And I suppose that's the level that the French are trying to play at and how they're approaching this. And that's ultimately why they're silver and really going hard to threaten England for the gold. And yeah, it's very impressive, their operational model to be a almost professional type team.
Yeah, I chat to the French Wargamers a little bit, and I had them on the channel, and I would tune in. And it was, what surprised me was I went onto Twitch at the time, and the TSN network would have about, at least every time I would log in, we'd be about 500 people would be watching at any given time, or at least when I logged in. I would look at the French counterparts, and they'd be on 2,200 people watching their stream. So I don't know if the community is just crazy popular, if it's just come down to like the French speaking people. So maybe the Canadians, the French Canadians, and other communities coming to a native French speaker, or whatever it might be. But absolutely, you look at those photos and look very professional, and certainly someone that's going to be, very much challenging those podiums, and very well may actually take it over, in the near future. But I did hear a lot of great stories about them. But I think, are you going in as a team just to have fun and roll dice and do really well? And I think probably one of the things that I'm sure you're thinking about now is, for the next 12 months until the next tournament, how do we get the best team? How do we best prepare them? How do we build the right lists? How do we stay on top of the meta? The things that the Americans did, the Americans hired a house literally for a week, and everyone flew in, and they had a practice week of gaming. How often do you as a team meet up at tournaments and practice and the group talk? And there's just so much that goes into obviously creating a great team to get a great outcome. And I think we're only scratching the surface, right? We talked to Tom Horsley, for example, like he would just have an industrial amount of knowledge that he wouldn't tell us because that's his.
Yeah, it's hard for us. Like we're a huge country, and it's very costly for us to try and travel around and catch up.
We didn't have a single player from the same city.
Yeah, like Clarke and Sam were the closest.
That's
they're
2-hour drive. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas
I'm not making excuses here. We're not making excuses. It's just the reality of what was going to take to build a professional top tier team.
Yeah,
and TTS was great.
Yeah, the French are the example. The French and the English, obviously, gold, silver. The French have a different model of how they did it to the English, but the English caught up for games days practice, and they were much tighter, and they've been around for a long institutional continuous history, as well as a big teams culture in the English scene. And the French do have a very different model. But yeah, if Australia wants to be going for podium, where we have to take some lessons and adapt them for us to compete at that level.
Yeah. So to finish what I was saying about what I learned, I think, we definitely need a coach for the team. I think you need that extra person. I know it's hard it's hard to ask someone to fly across the other side of the world, spend, $3,000 on flights and more on accommodation just to go to an event to be a coach and not play. I think that's really tough to ask someone to do that. But I think after being at this event, I think it's something that needs to be done. And as far as my list went to, I think everyone has, my list, I think, was a bit different to other IDNF lists. And after talking to all of my opponents, they all had me as green matchups, which kind of helped me which worked in my favor quite a bit as well with my games, which I guess that's what you kind of want when you go a little bit off meta with your pick, with your list, and catch some people out, which doesn't always happen, but I think I got a bit lucky there with my list.
Then let's do two last questions. The first one, I want to go back to what Clarke kind of said, and he was alluding to, and that is if Australia wanted to be a top team, a podium team, what would it take? What do we need in order to become a podium team? Any
we just need if we could take our top 10 players,
Yeah, if we had our absolute top 10 of Corey and
two Joels,
both Joels, Dave, Matt, we've got our absolute best, and I didn't play against anybody over the event that I'd say was wow, any better than Joel or Corey, and Joel and Corey have smacked me enough, or Dave or Matt. Those guys have smacked me around enough in real life and TTS to have a feel for what the very best are. And our absolute pointy end tip of the tip is world class.
Put that to a side, because getting someone to be able to leave their family or have unless we find a financial backer that's going to pay for this, obviously that there are going to be limitations on people.
Isn't that what your Patreon's for, Coach? You're going to sponsor the team next year?
Malta.
Outside of that, is there anything else that you think maybe now that you've got the knowledge of Worlds that you could probably enhance the team by doing X? Mind you as well, we had a whole bunch of heavy lockdowns, like New South Wales. I had 5 months of heavy lockdown where there was literally no games. So some countries have had a really good head start on 3rd edition. Anything else?
Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think we were that far behind, to be honest. I know we were behind England, but if we cast England and France out of the top 2 and look at everyone else, I think we were as good as anyone else there. Essentially, we only just lost to 3rd position on the ladder. So, and a couple of teams that finished higher than us, we beat as well. So I don't think we were that far off. I think it just essentially, as Clarke said, it comes down to taking your best players that you can. It's just being in Australia, I think it's really hard to be able to get everyone together and play games, practice what they do everywhere else. I think that just lets us down, but I think TTS was great. We got a lot of games in over TTS and practice lists and all that. So I don't know apart from getting a coach, I think experience now too. And as we talked about earlier, maybe if there was more teams events in Australia, that could obviously help us. I feel like after this event, I have a lot more experience, and I think I could do a better job next if I was to go again, which I've sort of said I'm not. But if I was to go again, I think I'd have a better understanding of matchups and probably prep our matchups before the event a lot better as well. But yeah, I don't think there's a hell of a lot that we could do.
The reason I ask you this is because Australia being a large country is already a limitation, and Mathew Tyrrell is not going to change that at all. It's always going to be a limitation. So it's what's within our control that we can start doing within the limitations, and whether it is more TTS focuses, if it is encouraging more team events locally, whatever we can possibly do. And I think, like Lex has made a good point. I would probably agree with what Lex has said. I think it takes more than 10 best players in any given country. There's so much more. There's the personality mixes. It's there's a lot that goes into a champion team. And just to say practicing alone is only part of the battle. But I'm sure there'll be more reflection and more discussion and more, Matt, if you're not going next year, how do you pass on that knowledge that you have gained to the next leader? Because whoever does the matchups next year, it's going to be their first time. So it's almost like, how do you build that knowledge and those systems over time?
And obviously that's hard again with, where I live and stuff and being able to catch up in person. So definitely would be doing stuff online and maybe over Skype or something and take them through some matchups like that and just teach them what I've learned essentially and go from there. Well,
maybe it's also like finding 3 or 4 different events through the year and it's a must attend for everybody. Everyone goes to the Sydney GTs and the Rune Axes and the Vic GTs and whatever it might be. It's like joining the team, you must attend these events. And then there's TTS, there's other events, subsidiary stuff. But
it is that it makes it hard too in that sense. Like I know my wife, for example, was dead against me doing other events while I had this Worlds lined up because she knew I was going to be going away for this huge event. And then obviously the cost, like if you're paying $5 or $6 grand to get to Worlds, and it's going to make it tough to then pay. Sometimes like a tournament weekend can cost you $500 to $1,000 in Australia. Like by the time you pay for flights or accommodation, and everything else, like it's not cheap. Yeah. So if you're going to have to go to 4 or 5 events plus Worlds, it can become quite costly as well. It's difficult.
I'm scaling back my local events. Like I'd love to go to more domestic events, but I'm going to get LVO. And I'm probably I either want to go to Worlds next year or I want to do something in Europe. But, I can't do that plus all of the other events. You're right. Finances kind of come in. But anything else that anyone wants? Clarke, Auckman? Clarke.
No, nothing really down there. You just indicated, Coach, that you may be interested in Worlds. Big question back on you. You've asked a lot of questions on us. If you are at Worlds, are you applying for Team Australia or Team Malta?
I think for me, you talked about what drove you to apply for a team. And I think national pride is something that I would love to represent Malta. I am half Maltese, like my father is Maltese. I'm dual citizen. I'm a very proud Maltese person. I think if the opportunity arose and the travel and the location, I think definitely that would probably be my preference.
Yeah.
I think Australia has some great players, and I don't think Australia needs me. Talking to the Maltese people and talking the fact that they don't have any 2-dayers, I think there's a lot of things that I can offer to that team. So, and I can in good hands. That's where I'm at.
No, full respect for that. You're a dual citizen. You got that heritage there, and the Maltese guys were awesome, and they were great fun to play in round one. And that definitely benefit from your coaching and skill and experience as well.
I think at the same time as well, like my intentions and something that I've learned over time is when I go overseas, I don't want to be the best of the best. What I enjoy the most is hanging out with people, chatting. I obviously want to do well at tournaments, but I'm not vying for the top table. I don't want to be pushing against England and France, as cool as it would be. So, like, with running a YouTube channel and the commitments that you guys have shared, the TTSing and the tournaments, I don't know if as a YouTuber I can handle that. I think I would have to downscale what I do on YouTube quite significantly. I couldn't attend most of my TTS tournaments because it happens overnight, because I'm normally recording content on a Saturday and a Sunday. So, and like, I'll get a divorce. So I think there's some things I've got to accept. And I think that, again, I'm probably not in a life stage right now where I could commit wholly to Australia, personally speaking. Yep. As cool as it would be. But if you want to pay for me and come over as a coach, happy to do so. But I think to your point, do you want to spend 7 to 8 grand to fly over?
Hang on. Weren't we talking the other way? That was AoS coach was sponsoring us, wasn't it? Never mind.
I think so. Last question. Will you? Yeah, nice try. You need to up your Patreon a bit more if you want me to be paying for you sponsoring the team. Last question, and that is, by the way, like Lex has also said, mad respect to Australians and also the Americans, right? Like anyone who traveled a significant, the Canadians were going to, and unfortunately a few things happened in Canada. There's, anyone who travels significant distance to get to Prague, kudos to you, absolute champions for doing that. But would you attend next year? Or maybe better question, would you attend in a subsequent year? If the time arose and you had the finances, is this something you'd go to again? Orkman, I'll go to you first, then Clarke, then Matt, because Matt's already kind of told us a little.
So for me, you never say never, but I think the mercenary years are over for me. But I would definitely like, depending on the location, I would like to go to a singles event just to meet up the people. And as I kind of mentioned, I really try to set up a Team Hungary. And first, I'm not that ambitious, but maybe we can go to some smaller team events across Europe, as I mentioned now, kind of opening up this international scene. So maybe 4 or 5 teams events, and maybe later, in a couple of years, once we have a full foundation, maybe we go as a Team Hungary. So that will be the dream, but definitely going to singles is on the agenda.
That's awesome, because I've heard rumblings that Japan is thinking about running a team. I've heard Singapore might be throwing a team across the pond. New Zealand might come. I think Worlds next year could have the potential of 30 plus countries. I think if the world is in a good spot, and obviously, COVID version 7,000 million, whatever it works out to be. I think we're okay. I think this could get.
Yeah, I think this event was very successful from every angle. So it's definitely give a big boost to the whole community. So yeah, much more to come.
Fingers crossed for Hungary. Clarke, where are you at? Will you apply again, and why?
I'm absolutely, definitely applying at some point. And I look forward to playing against Orkman as captain of Team Hungary in a couple of years as he builds up his scene. So I'm subject to obviously continuing to perform locally sufficiently well to justify a slot on the team. I'd be keen to go back. Next year exactly is going to be up to family and other commitments and other timing. But if it's not next year, I'll be putting my hand up for the year after. And that could be one of the Australian things. Maybe there's a cycling of people on and off the team over a couple of years cycle just due to the cost.
And that's why I said to you, would you go in subsequent years? Because maybe, spending like 10 grand might be a bit much every year, but maybe every 2 years, it could, you're right. Maybe there could be a rotating thing. Matt, would you go again in future years? I know next year might be a challenge, and I can appreciate that. Would you go in another year?
Oh, look, hands down, I'd go next year if the wife allowed it.
Just win lotto.
As you were mentioning before,
just need a big
Coach,
sponsor. That's not me. That's not me.
I don't think that the money's not really the issue. It's more the family. Like as you said before, Coach, you'd end up divorced if you tried to do everything you wanted to do. And I feel sometimes it's a bit the same way. Like even with events in Australia, I find it hard to get to that many. Like I get to only maybe 3 a year at most. So I hands down, I'd go next year. I'd love to go again. I think I performed well enough on the team to probably get a spot again, depending on who applied. But in subsequent years, if things change at home and Mrs. says, you can go again or whatever, like at the end of the day, I'd love to do it again. I really enjoyed it, and I'd want to go back and try and get a better result for the team. I guess try and get a podium finish.
And I have heard that the location for next year is up for grabs. There's a couple of countries that could be the location. I think I've heard Spain and Netherlands and Finland. I think I've heard about 5 different locations that at least putting their hand up. And I guess if it was like Spain, for example, I reckon it'd be an easy sell to the wife. Like, hey, let's go to Spain. And I don't know, have margaritas or something for a couple of days while I go play with my war dollies. I reckon that's an easy sell. If it happens to be another country, might be a little bit harder. Yeah,
it's hard when you got, like, I've got 3 young kids as well. So, like, even like the missus could have came this time around, but it was, having to leave 3 kids at home for a couple of weeks and with, family and that, it's really tough on her. And then when she did stay home, having to look after kids. So even, I guess and then if you take your partner, then you're paying for flights for 2 people. Like, everything you do, like you might spend $5,000 on yourself, but then your holiday's costing you $10,000. Like, it's doubling. Everything you do, it's just doubling straight away then. So it's not easy. It's tough, but if all the stars aligned and everything was a go, I'd definitely go again next year.
Cool. That sounds like a great thing. I think everyone in the Worlds chat in my Discord who attended would absolutely go again. They absolutely love the experience. People who are watching like me from afar, wanting to now get in, they're like, yeah, cool. Next year might be a lot better. I'd love to apply. So if you're listening to this and you've hung around and you've listened to these legends talking, thank you so much to all 3 of them. I would, if you're interested, I would inquire with your country. I will probably retrospectively go into the description and I'll try to grab as many of the Twitter handles I can possibly find. And I would reach out. I would reach out to my country and I'd say, hey, I'm interested in applying for Austria. What does it take for me to be in the Austria team? And they would probably share with you some more information. They might have a website. They might be able to tell you what they're looking for. And maybe they tell you that in order to get in there, you need to podium at least one event of 50 players. Like, at least it gives you a benchmark to work towards. And each country is going to be different. But I hope this has inspired or at least interested and got some people curious on the world scene. And again, I'll give a massive shout out to the AoS Worlds Council. I'll give a massive shout out to the TSN and the French War Gamers for the streaming, and all of you for just sharing your wisdom. So Matt, Péter, and Clarke, thank you all. Any shout outs that you want to make before we kind of wrap this up and I go to sleepy? Matt,
I'll go first.
Borderline Gaming, come on.
I want to shout out Borderline Gaming. I want to also shout out the team that we took over. I was very impressed with everyone, and we had a good time. We all became good mates out of it all, and it was really good. So thanks a lot.
By the way, before we go on to the others, would you ever consider like a ANZ team, like Australia, New Zealand combined?
Well, we tried to do that this year. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. So I'm definitely looking into it for next year because New Zealand are going to struggle to get their 8 players.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, so that'll definitely on the cards for next year. Yeah,
cool.
It's already been discussed. Yep.
Péter, Orkman.
Let me shout out to my buddy Jolly Blade, who was my number 1 training partner and sometimes suffered from my orcs, but very bravely. And also, without naming names, just shout out to all the TTS people who was following the events where I just met. I really love all of them. So thank you for putting all these events on TTS. So we can.
Cool. Shout out to what Owen Jackson run TTS events. Pask run TTS events.
Oh yeah, so many Stuarts also involved in. So just even Metron on TTS events. So there's just so many things around. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, if anyone's interested, like Tabletop Simulator, my server is pumping with games. It's a great way to meet the international community. So, and it's a great way to get practice outside of the weekend. So, big love to go learn TTS. I don't think it'll ever replace the plastic, but it's a great complementary tool that will support you to be a better player, get you more exposure. I know there's plenty of people that tell me that, their community doesn't have like a Lumineth player. Well, cool. There's plenty of them online. Go get experience with them. Clarke, bring it home. Who are we shouting out?
I want to thank, first off, thank the organisers of Worlds. If anyone's watching, incredible event, just great work. I want to thank the associated media, so TSN, Honest Wargamer, Coach yourself, and any other content creator that is pumping and building this community. There is a tipping point happening with the way that the sport is evolving to really bring it as a global community together. And I think Worlds is the premier of that, and it works well. And the final shout out for me is a thank you to all my teammates and team captain across Australia, Team Australia. It's been an honour and a privilege to work with you for the last 6 months, or some of you like Matt for nearly 3 years to get to the end. And I know you're all sick of me writing my long form essays in the group chat about every tiny nuance of the game, but thanks for persevering through all that. And love you guys.
So the Australia team was Mathew Tyrrell, Michael Clarke, Sam Morgan, Dave Kerr, Alex Cron, Stuart McCowan, and then Poiter and Fabian Quinn. So that was the Australia team. And again, all of the teams are on the aosworlds.org website, and you can see who it was on the teams and also the list. You can see the list, you can see the players packs, you can see a whole bunch of things that we've kind of talked about, and we've only kind of skimmed the surface. But thank you so much for this amazing. I said to you guys, I'm like, this would be like 60 to 90 minutes. Like, I'm sorry. Apologize to your wives for me. Tell me you're with a bearded man. I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Much appreciated. Poiter, Matt, Clarkey, thank you all. And I'm going to play the outro. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.